this about? You tell me sky is the limit. You tell me reach for the clouds. I say my respect goes out to the real father them. I see everything I did for me. One heap of thanks me give daddy. My respect goes out to the real father them. I see everything.
The new KFC Cheetza Zinger, available for a limited time. KFC, it's finger-licking good. The time by KFC is...
What's the state of the water resources in Jamaica? And what's the state of the infrastructure to take the water from the treatment plant through the potable lines and into your home and office? And have you ever wondered what would happen if Jamaica were to reach a situation where the country ran out of water? Those issues, I intend to get the answers to those questions right here on Lead Story this evening on CVM TV with the Minister in charge of water, Senator Matthew Samuda. Welcome to Lead Story here on CVM TV. It's the Friday edition, the Friday after the Thursday before, where my team, Colombia, emerged victorious in the CVM Pre-Copa America in-house football competition. Of course, you know that the Copa America will be live right throughout the tournament. Here on CVM TV, you'll be able to see the Reggae Boys battling Argentina, Brazil, and the best teams from South America. All the teams from South America, all 10 will be there, along with some host teams to make for a bumper competition being played in the United States. And my Colombia easily won the title on Thursday evening, defeating a spirited Brazil team as we did in the first match of the competition. And I had to use my time on air to say well done to my teammates and well played to Brazil for making it all the way to the final. All right, to the business at hand now, because some parts of the island which have been parched for several months have gotten some reprieve in the last 2 to 3 weeks as heavy rains have caused the water catchment areas to fill up sufficient for the National Water Commission to be able to pump potable water to them inside their homes. While that is the case with some residents in some communities, other parts of the island which have been parched since last year are still experiencing drought conditions. The drought continues to bite. And we've had a lot of conversations on this show and elsewhere in the media about water situation, the water crisis in specific parts of the island. We want to look a little bit more broadly this evening to look at the situation concerning the water resources overall and whether the infrastructure is in place, is being put in place, has the necessary funding to be put in place to allow the commodity to be moved from the point of the treatment of water all the way to your home and to your business place. And the man in charge of water in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation is Senator Matthew Samuda, and he joins me this evening to have this very, very important conversation. Welcome to the Lead Story here on CVM TV, Minister.
Thank you, George. Thank you for finally inviting me to the Lead Story. Very important program, but we're happy to join.
Excellent, sir. I assume that, like me, you watched with some amount of trepidation, even though they are a world away. They're about 8 to 12 hours ahead in South Africa, in the Western Cape. As Cape Town reached the point where it almost ran out of water, there was a daily counter to say 3 days until zero water, 2 days until zero water, and they averted it by a minor miracle. And I guess the obvious place to start based on that, Minister, people will wonder, what if Jamaica were to reach a point where the country ran out of water? What measures does the government have in place? What plan to action to satisfy the basic needs of a citizenry in a situation like that?
So I bring your attention to Jamaica Gleaner story of June 7th, 1973, which the main page of our front page of the Gleaner at that time said water down to crisis levels. Now this was previous to the Yallahs pipeline into Kingston and St. Andrew, and showed the level of water insecurity long before climate change was a reality that used to exist in Jamaica. Unfortunately, Jamaica did not develop in a particular manner that measured its water supply against where it should develop. Now, Jamaica is the land of wood and water, and I want to start from there. That tells you that the problems that we have are fixable. Doesn't mean that the problems that we have are cheap to fix. What it just means that the problems that we have are indeed fixable. So last year, in about October or September of last year, the Prime Minister tabled the Water Resources Master Plan, which is a requirement of the Water Resources Agency Act. And he did that. And that showed, George, that Jamaica still has, by parish, sufficient groundwater and river coverage to supply potable water, irrigation water to our citizens. What we don't have, and we should not be shy about, and we should not be cute about, is sufficient infrastructure to convert raw water to potable water. We simply don't have that. And it's impatient of debate, we don't need to be cute about it. The reality is, over the last 40 years, the investments have been insufficient to allow for this. The last major investment in that 40-year period was the Yalas pipeline done by then Prime Minister Siaga in 82 or 83. Previous to that, 65 years ago, was the Mona Reservoir, which there was always contemplation that it would be expanded and that it would be a part of the Mahogany Vale system, which would start at Hagley Gap in St. Thomas. And before that, there was a Hermitage system. Those are the three large investments in our water system over the last 100 years. The Hermitage system was built 95 years ago to last for 50 years. So we shouldn't be shy about the fact that though we have sufficient groundwater, we don't have sufficient infrastructure.
Yeah, right. So you say that to say that on the point of Jamaica running out of water, I know that the Israelis have desalination capabilities. That is extremely expensive. So you're saying that there is enough water across the island where the country running out of water is not a real possibility, hence no specific plan in place to account for that eventuality?
No, I don't know that I want to make all of those leaps, because it's not one leap, George. Ultimately, the country, through its Water Resources Master Plan, which is done by the Water Resources Authority and NEPA and Ministry of Health and NWC and all the varying agencies that touch water, will tell you that we have sufficient groundwater, because we do. Question is whether we live in proximity to that groundwater. So it's not that you won't have a household that doesn't have water, because I don't want anyone to be confusing the fact that we have water challenges with the fact that we have sufficient groundwater supply for home and irrigation needs. Because we do have sufficient. Whether you live in proximity to it or not is a different matter. But from an infrastructure standpoint, there should be no illusion. The government of the day has never invested what is required to have a distribution system, a storage capacity that will allow water resilience for Jamaicans. It's never happened, and you can go to each decade since independence and prove that. That's not limited to this decade, unfortunately.
Yeah, all right. Let's look at basic infrastructure now, and let me walk you from the perspective of the water treatment plant and the pumping of the water to communities across the island. I know for a fact, not asking anybody if this is true, that the National Water Commission sends more press releases weekly and daily than every other government entity combined. Yeah, because I get them in my inbox. Most of these press releases, Minister, concern plants which are down because of pump failure. Pump failure equaling plant downtime equals residents not having access to the commodity. So I've always asked myself, what is it about water pumps? Is it a water pump issue anywhere in the world that causes us to, having purchased the same water pumps, to be experiencing so much downtime, which results in residents not being able to get water? Or is it something about the way the pumps operate in Jamaica that accounts for the frequent downtime that causes residents to not have water? And I don't know if you've investigated the issue or looked at the trend, but I'm still asking you for an answer to that.
So for the last 2.5 years, George, I've done nothing else but investigate the issue, because ultimately it's not a one-size-fits-all. Each community, each length of the distribution, stretch within the utility footprint has different issues. So Jamaica has a storage issue. Let's start there. And why I started the last 3 major investments made into water is because I think the public needs to understand we don't have enough primary, secondary, or tertiary storage. And that's impatient to debate regardless of where you live in Jamaica. Now, yes, our geography provides a certain amount of groundwater storage, a certain amount of underground storage, but we don't have enough storage in the context of the changing climate that we're facing, in the context of our existing drought, seasonalities. That's a reality. So Jamaica will have to invest at its primary, secondary, and tertiary level. It's why the country has said it will build a reservoir in Rock River, Clarendon. It's why it says that we're doing the technical work now to ensure that a system announced by the British government in 1923 in Mahogany Vale at Hagley Gap will build a dam in that space. It's why we will rebuild the Hermitage Dam, because we know that at primary level we don't have enough storage. At the secondary level, the government has built 32 major community tanks over the last 3 years, and we'll build another 40 over the next 3 years. These tanks are between 50,000 gallons and 1 million gallons in terms of storage, Josh. So we continue to build those out. But you'd have also, as citizens should recall, the announcement for the Prime Minister that we will distribute some 10,000 tanks, smallest of which will be 400 gallons, to citizens most in need. These are citizens that live outside of the utility footprint and are below the poverty gap. They need the most help. So we're doing the social assessment now, and we're in the procurement on these 10,000 tanks, because ultimately, George, we don't have enough storage. But in the big issue, which no one wants to talk about because it's the least sexy issue in water, NRW, non-revenue water. This is water that leaks or is stolen. You have parts of this country, George, large parts of this country that are above 70% in their NRW, meaning that more than 70% of the water that the government collects, stores, processes, is pumped into the ground or is stolen. And that is the issue that the government of Jamaica is primarily focused on over the next 2 years. It is repairing the leaking and creaking infrastructure that we have for distribution. It is why the Prime Minister would have announced recently $160 million that will be put into the distribution network between the Martha Brae and the western end of the grid. It's why we are actively in tender already on $300 million of major distribution lines on a national NRW program. It's why the government over the last 9 years has cut leaks in Kingston and St. Andrew and Portmore by more than 50%. George. Right.
So
that's the issue. It's the distribution network.
So excellent. So it's still a distribution, but I'm still sticking with the question, because here's why I asked the question, Minister. I get the calls to ask, George, why is it that my community and 15 others in an NWC press release, residents are being told you won't have any water for 2 to 3 days because this pump is down? Is it that we're using inferior pumps? Is it that the maintenance of the pumps is a problem? Is it that we're using pumps different from those used elsewhere in the world, in a country or space with the topography similar to Jamaica? Because it is enduringly frustrating to tell someone that it's not that there isn't any water, it's just that there isn't any pump working in your area to pump the water that exists to you through the pipeline, through the distribution network, to your home. That's a frustrating point for residents. That's why I put that question to you about the quality of workmanship and the quality of the pumps in these pumping stations, or at these pumping stations. You can take that question after the break because I'm up on the break now. This is lead story. I'm speaking with the minister. Yeah, we'll take that after the break. This is the minister in charge of water, Senator Matthew Samuda, talking about infrastructure and the state of the water resources in the country. More after these.
Jamaican athletes will clash at the J3A Puma National Senior and Junior Championships at the National Stadium, June 27 to 30. For tickets to the Summer Olympics in Paris, Olympic champion Hansel Parchment, plus Oblique Seville headline the men's division, which also includes Rashid Broadbell, Rashawn Clark, Jaden Hibbert, Hakeem Blake, Johan Blake, and Julian Fort. Olympic and world champions Sharika Jackson, Elaine Thompson-Hera, and Shelly Ann Fraser-Price, along with Rochelle Clay, Shanika Ricketts, and Danielle Williams, will make the action pulsating on the women's side. That's the J3A Puma National Senior and Junior Championship, June 27 to 30 at the National Stadium. It will be sensational.
The time by Grace. Taste that moves you is
6:45.
Back with us on Lead Story, we're talking water here on the Friday edition of the show. I have the Minister in charge of water with me, Senator Matthew Samuda, and what is true is that the question I've asked, or the question I posed prior to the break, ought properly to be put to the man in charge of the NWC who deals with operations. It's perhaps unfair to put that one to the minister. And we have a tendency in this country. We find the ministers, we ask them all kinds of things that they really don't have day-to-day control of. But the minister is in the unfortunate position of being the one here that I have to put the question to. And I have to put the question along the lines because it is endearingly frustrating for people to hear that there is water available, but the pump from the pumping station that serves your community is down. And they say again, and I'm saying the flood of releases that the NWC produces and sends to media each week talking about pumps being down, pump broken down, pumps being down, pump broken down. It is just frustrating for residents. And so I'm asking the minister if there's a problem there, what has his assessment, if he has done one, said about the pumping situation that undermines the resources spent to build out a transmission network, to reduce non-revenue water, to treat the water properly. But if there's no pump to pump that water to residents, then all that effort, all that expenditure is laid waste. And so, Minister, I bring the question now for you to address.
So the first thing, George, and that everyone should be very clear on is that, the last 40 years has seen a chronic disinvestment in the water sector. But I don't have the luxury of blaming anyone else. I'm not going to shift responsibility to the head of the Water Commission. Ultimately, this government is the government that's going to fix it. There's a major problem. We're going to invest what is required to fix storage, processing, and distribution of our water to ensure that we build water resilience. I'm not shirking the responsibility, right? Ultimately, we have to do. What people did before is irrelevant at this juncture. Pumping, George, as with storage, is inadequate. We have, in many places of very critical importance, 70-year-old pumps. Pumps that are older than you, pumps that are older than me, pumps that are older than many people you work with, George. Electrics are not meant to last 70 years. And we have 70-year-old pumps. That's the short version. Now, you have an aging energy infrastructure, which I'm not going to take on tonight because that's not my responsibility. The government is starting a program which will see 30 of its oldest pumps and most critical pumps upgrade each year. The government has about 840 pumping stations, I believe. Changing the 30 most at risk and 30 oldest will see us reducing the major issue that we face significantly. In 2015, we changed 4 pumps. So when we're at the point where we're changing 30 a year, you understand the level of upgrade that you will see. But we're also rewiring our pump houses. We're also purchasing generators for areas that have regular single-phase issues like Negril, which is served by Logwood. I just put in a new generator in that space. We're also looking for new solar parks to not just reduce our energy costs, but to make it more resilient. But places like Forest Hills, which serves Red Hills, which is chronically supplied. I mean, they have all right to be upset. As well as places like Pepper in St. Elizabeth, which serves Manchester. So we're putting in the sort of electrical infrastructure that we need. This year we'll spend about $900 million on that, George. But ultimately, if I was going to break it in 1 year, I'd need $9 billion.
Hear you on that. All right. So that's a start in addressing the issue, because I was wondering if I was imagining that is at the heart, at the plinth of the
but there's
issue.
Nothing more upsetting. There's nothing more upsetting than that, George.
Exactly.
You get the press release, I get the mechanical update.
Yes.
I get both.
Yes.
So there's nothing more upsetting than knowing that you have sufficient water
Yes.
to serve your citizens, but the electrical and distribution infrastructure is inadequate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because my phone starts ringing at 3 o'clock in the morning, every single morning.
Yes.
From people who complain. So I feel it. I understand.
Yes. On the issue of transmission, because there's nothing, well, apart from the pumping issue, the other thing frustrating for me and for people when they hear these things and they call journalists and rant because they can't reach the NWC boss and it's tough for them to reach a minister sometimes. They speak of transmission and the fact of treated water, which is expensive to treat, put in a pipeline and the water leaks like a sieve. So this island is big by island standards in this part of the world. How much pipeline are you planning and have the funding to replace and renew over the next 3 to 5 years?
So, John, I don't want to zone into it in that particular way.
Yes.
The World Bank has done an assessment at our request, and it has said that we need $5 billion between now and 2030 to upgrade our water and sanitation systems. Jamaica is on track to spend, at current rate of spend, about $800 million within that gap. That's the reality. So we have to find a way to either earn, capitalize, spend, borrow, if necessary, which we don't want to get into.
Yes.
Because of where we're coming from. $4.2 billion of projects. That's the reality. No,
US dollars.
Yeah, we don't speak in local currency when it comes to infrastructure.
Yes.
So that's the unfortunate reality of our development story.
Yes.
Jamaica has a need of $5 billion for water infrastructure with a per capita income of $5,000. That's the reality. So regardless of which area of water supply you want to dive into, there's gonna be an inadequacy.
Yes.
We simply, when the average person pays $4,000 to $5,000, $3,000 in some cases for their water bill, you're gonna have a challenge. But at $5,000 per capita, you also don't have the economic space to charge people with. So what it means in the current space is that the government has to spend its capital budget on its distribution network. And we are. This year, George, we're spending $5 billion Jamaican dollars. But I wish it was 50.
Yes.
I know it needs to be 50 to make the gaps. But in 2015, it was 400. So we have come a long way. We have a long way to go. But we will get there as long as we stay the course.
Yes. If you zone the island, Minister, by need, which sector of the island is this infrastructure work screaming loudest for attention in?
So in 2015, Kingston and St. Andrew required 55 million gallons a day. Because of the infrastructure work that we've done, it now requires 38 million gallons a day. Because we have cut leaks in half. We've cut leaks by 40% in Portmore. The rest of the island's distribution network is in shambles. Now, western end of the island, because of the recent drought and the shifting weather patterns, has faced an extreme. Their water situation is chronic. They've gone through hell. And it has weighed on them, it has weighed on government, it has weighed on every citizen in Jamaica. So this government, having assessed that, putting in 160 million US dollars, George, in distribution mains from Martha Brae to the west end of Migrant. Because they absolutely, it is terrible. It's not been an easy period for them. And ultimately, based on the economic projections, we could have done this 20 years ago. We just didn't have the fiscal space.
The issue of rising sea levels precipitated, hastening the occurrence of, by climate change. Now, I know that there's a part of St. Anne in particular, certain communities in southeast St. Anne, perhaps the largest constituency by spread in the island, where residents have said that the potable water that comes to them, Minister, is increasingly saline. Yeah? In other words, salt water coming through the potable pipelines. And this is as a result of contamination of the water, of the water table and so forth. So I ask, is there, based on your assessment of the situation and the information coming to you, is this a situation that will manifest in other parts of the island, or is this restricted to that area in St. Anne and parts of Portland, where I've also heard people tell me directly that this is a problem in their communities as well?
So George, I'd be very surprised if it's an issue in southeast St. Anne as it is in the hilly interior. But for southeast Clarendon, in Pernell Child's constituency and Lothan Cousins, it's definitely an issue. There is deep saline intrusion in the water supply in those spaces. In places like Old Harbour that former Minister Warmington represents, there is definitely saline intrusion. Port Maria for Dr. Guy definitely would have some problems, and even Port Antonio. So there are parts of the country that are feeling the worst impacts of climate change already. Sections of Savannah Lamarck also with George, right, because you're seeing saline intrusion in our wells. Now, ultimately, saline intrusion into our wells is catastrophic, because 70% of our population live within 5 kilometers of the sea and low-lying areas. But the biggest issue that we face, George, is the infrastructure inadequacy, because the biggest environmental risk we face is the backyard pit. Because the nitrates that are flowing into our high water table destroy much of our water supply. So ultimately, the issue is twofold, right? Our own environmental practices mixed with the infrastructure challenge, as well as the fact along the south coast where 2 million people live, where you have rising sea levels at a particular rate, causes an issue. So I don't want to oversimplify it, George. There are communities that are below, not just at sea level, that are seeing particular impact, and we're very clear on it. We're very concerned and worried about it, admittedly. But, you know, we're working with what we have.
Hear you on that. Minister, the time has run out. We could be here for another 2 hours. But thank you very much for taking the time. And I anticipate, given the challenge that this is a perennial issue and it's unfolding, that we'll have cause to talk again very, very soon. Thank you.
But I want to show